Bach Prelude and Fugue in A minor. Johann Sebastian Bach was born in March of 1685. His father was the court trumpeter for the Duke of Eisenach and the director of musicians of the town of Eisenach in Thuringia. The family had a wide reputation for musical talent, and while Bach went to St. Michael's School in Leuenberg, because of his singing skills, he had been taught to play several different instruments by his father and brother. He held several revered positions in Germany for dukes and churches throughout his career. Bach used many established German styles through his skill in counterpoint and harmonic organ works, and adapted rhythms, forms, and textures from abroad, particularly from Italy and France, into his compositions. His compositions include the Brandenburg Concertos, the Mass in B minor, the Well-Tempered Clavier, along with numerous cantatas, partitas, passions, and organ works. His music is revered because of its intellectual depth, the technical aspects and complexity, and artistic beauty. Bach's Prelude and Fugue in A minor has been compared to a fantasia and toccata because of the embellishments and ornamentation. Some theorize that this piece was influenced by Bach's time in North Germany and was written during his time in Weimar, where he was a court organist and concert master and studied at the North German organ school under Dietrich Buxtehude. It is said that the prelude mimics Buxtehude's style of composition. This piece is also thought to have been influenced, as many of his works were, by Antonio Vivaldi, who was also a mentor to him, and whose style of violin concerto can be heard in the fugue. On July 28, 1750, Bach died at age 65 in the city of Leipzig, Germany. The Prelude and Fugue in A minor is an organ toccata and fugue which was composed around 1708 or 1715 during the Baroque period. Because the piece was composed so late in the Baroque period and it was transcribed by Liszt for the piano at a later date, it has also been called a classical piece. The Prelude has a very bright tone color, and while the fugue stays bright, it's a little bit darker with the addition of the lower keyboards and pedal for the organ. It is typical in Bach pieces for the Prelude to transition right into the fugue, and this piece is no exception. The Prelude ends on an A major chord, and the fugue begins right where it left off. The texture of the piece is homophonic and chromatic, while the fugue is polyphonic with the additions of the two lower lines. The piece switches from the homophonic texture to the polyphonic texture when it eases into the fugue and more layers of music are added. The Prelude has an underlying pedal on A, which comes in at measure 10, and it lasts for the next 14 measures. This pedal harmonizes with the notes being played on the keyboard. At measure 6 of the fugue, you will notice that the notes are transposed and the intervals remain the same in a third. The first 4 measures of the fugue outline that the piece is in A minor, but there are no accidentals until the G sharp. That's in measure 5. There are very few places in the piece where there's only one part playing solo. The Prelude was written in 4/4 time, while the fugue was written in 6/8 time. The Prelude and fugue are very closely related, and again, the Prelude leads immediately into the fugue. The rhythm of the Prelude is mostly horizontal, and the rhythm of the fugue is very vertical, but the last 6 systems of the Prelude start to become more vertical as it transitions. The melody in the Prelude sounds like an improvisation of the chord structures, and in fact comes from the broken down chords. The Prelude also includes plenty of ornamentation and embellishments, which were typical of the organ pieces at this time. I believe that the form of this piece is an ABA form. The Prelude follows a form similar to that of Buxtehude, where it stays in A minor the whole time but is not broken into segments, and the fugue contains violin-like figures reminiscent of a Vivaldi concerto, including the ritornello, which Vivaldi is famous for. This particular fugue does not contain the strict form usually used in the composition of German fugues. I compared this piece to Vivaldi's violin concerto in A minor, opus 3 number 6, which was written circa 1710. Much like Bach's Prelude and Fugue, this piece uses the ritornello form. Ritornello is an organization of instrumental music where the opening subject comes back over and over again in various keys and is most common in concertos. In Bach's fugue, the subject is found in the first 5 measures and comes back throughout the piece again and again. Principal stylistic features. The Prelude and Fugue blend elements of the Italian concerto, exemplified by Vivaldi, with the tradition inherited from Buxtehude. Bach's own distinctive musical personality is also present, such as in the way the opening figure in the prelude syncs chromatically. This is typical of his rich harmonic style. In the prelude, much of the figuration sounds like it was written for the violin, which mirrors the solos in Vivaldi concertos. In a historical context, whereas the Renaissance drew on the wealth and power of the Italian courts and was a blend of secular and religious forces, the Baroque was directly linked to the Counter-Reformation, the movement within the Catholic Church to reform itself in response to Protestant Reformation. Architecture and its embellishments in this time were a visible statement of the wealth and power of the Church. The artistic style used exaggerated motion and clear, easily interpreted detail to produce drama, tension, and grandeur in sculpture, and that was mirrored in both the painting and literature. We can see embellishments and ornamentation also in the music, with the several new forms of music that were coming into the era: cantatas, toccatas, fugues, fantasias, preludes, symphonias, and perhaps the most embellished and ornate, the opera. The social function of this piece would have been during a church processional, or as the church was coming in, or congregation was coming into the church and being seated. While this piece is not as well known as other Bach works, it is still equal to the best of them. The fugue would have been played at the beginning of a church service, but the entire piece would have most likely been performed at a recital in a concert hall. The people would have been exposed to this music would have been churchgoers and also aristocrats and royalty who would have paid to go hear this performed in recitals. And returning to the system, like I was talking about, the fugue starts on page 192, and you'll notice the subject there in the first 5 measures. At measure 6, it's transposed. On page 194, you'll see the subject again in the second system. The third measure begins with the same pitch. And on page 196 in the third system, the second measure, in the middle of that measure is the exact same subject. Thank you.